Thank you all. Thank you. So I was giving a talk yesterday. I actually used to believe in free speech. Anyway, this guy, the person said, "Do you think sports can possibly bring the nation together during this divisive time?" I said, "It's interesting you said that, because come over to the Bush Center. We've got an exhibit that basically says sports is a healing entity for our country." And so I thank you all for being here. I saw the exhibit. It is really good. I also saw the two dudes that are dressed like it's a football player and a baseball player. I don't know much about AI. I thought that might have been AI-generated people. Then the guy started to speak, and I was like, wow. I guess they do it for a living. Anyway. Whew. I want to recognize our new president and CEO, Shiloh Brooks. Welcome, Shiloh. I'm glad you're here. You got big shoes to fill. What, size 7s? Anyway, we're very proud of the job Ken did, and I'm very excited about Shiloh's leadership. I also want to thank the board of directors who are here. Thank you all for serving. Today I have the honor of introducing two sports legends, people I've been listening to for a long time, and people whose work I really admire. First, Joe Buck. He followed in his father's footsteps. Nothing wrong with that, Joe. You might hear him on TV calling the games with Dallas's own Troy Aikman, and they're a really good broadcast team. He's also a baseball guy. He's called a lot of World Series. And his partner on the stage today is one of the more unique voices in sports, Bob Costas. Costas, I told him that first heard him speak in person at Lover's Lane Methodist Church when he eulogized the great Mickey Mantle. He had one of the great opening lines of a eulogy. He said, all of us who are baby boomers, when we grew up, we were either Mantle fans or Mays fans. I turned to Laura and said, I was a Mays fan. Whereupon Costas said, I'm a Mantle fan, and gave one of the really great eulogies. It turns out that he's given like 9 eulogies for Hall of Fame players, which means that he understands death. Anyway, our daughter Jenna got to know him at the Olympics, and I'm sure you remember Costas at the Olympics. Both these men are really good at what they do, and we're really honored they are here tonight with us. Moderating the conversation is Bush Center's own Kevin Sullivan. Sully worked in the White House with me. He also worked at NBC Sports for a long period of time, so he's not a neophyte to sports, nor is he a stranger to our two panelists. So please welcome to the stage Bob Costas, Joe Buck, and Kevin Sullivan. You're there.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate that. What better way could there possibly be to launch our new Game Changer exhibit than with half of the modern sportscasting Mount Rushmore? So thank you to Bob and Joe for making the time.
Bob, by the way, is doing exactly what I just did. Word of the wise, if you're ever going to be on stage, wear long socks.
Yes, absolutely.
Or have it be in summer where you're a little tan, because if you looked at my legs right now, no.
You can tell this is going to be off the rails tonight, so buckle up, everybody. We do have a couple of more thank yous to hit, starting with Nexpoint, our longtime endowed sponsor for Engage at the Bush Center. We really appreciate our friends at Nexpoint. In tonight's program, we have some extra support from Veritex Community Bank, so we appreciate their support. The Game Changer exhibit would not have been possible without the support of a very generous donation from Major League Baseball. We appreciate that. Smoothie King, ESPN. Joe, thanks for putting a good word in for us with the crew.
I thought Stephen A. Smith Aikman and I took all the money, but I guess
That's right.
Yeah.
So ESPN we're grateful for. FlexJet, now you'll see on the screen here, one of the sponsors is the CFP Foundation. That is not the College Football Playoff. That's our friends at the Crum Foundation. The Kimmelman Family Foundation, Robert is here tonight. Thank you for being here. And Seth Keller Inc., there's a whole crew from Seth Keller Inc. here tonight. We appreciate your support and your being here. But a big thank you goes to Gary Weber, whose support has really made the Game Changer exhibit possible. Now, Gary, we know, and Gary's here tonight, Gary, we know, loves sports, but he also loves bringing people together. So let's hear it for Gary Weber, all of our sponsors, Nexpoint, Veritex. Now, Bob, you and Joe have both seen the exhibit.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, it's both moving and it's informative. We spend our lives in sports, so we know some of it, but there are a few things there that I was not familiar with or kind of refreshed my memory. And the video that greets you when you walk in about Game 3 of the World Series in 2001, when President Bush threw out the first pitch, when all of America was still dealing with the trauma of 9/11, it's barely a month later, and when a sellout crowd showed up at Yankee Stadium, but Joe, you were calling the game on Fox, there was the excitement of a World Series, but also people had to decide whether they wanted to be in such a prominent place when we didn't know at that point where the next attack might come from.
Yeah, it was a strange feeling. I know we all felt vulnerable back in 2001 when that happened, and then, everybody's life changed. If I think about that time, and it's almost hard to put yourself back in that moment, but I remember driving down to Busch Stadium on the 17th of September when baseball resumed. Everything just stopped, as we all know. Baseball resumed, and the odd feeling of driving down to a stadium where 45,000 people were going to be, feeling vulnerable and feeling like, we're all going to pack into the stadium. When's the next attack going to happen? My dad, and I don't want to jump ahead. I know, Sully, you've got a chronology to this, but my dad gave a speech on the field at Busch Stadium, which was one of the most moving things I ever heard him do. He was a Depression-era kid. He was a World War II vet. He was a Purple Heart recipient or earner. And he had been kind of the voice of St. Louis and the Cardinals for basically 50 years at that point. And he went down there, and he was at the end of his life, and he was at a time when he was writing a lot of poetry. And I was his first audience every time, and I'd roll my eyes and be like, Buck, I got another poem. I'm like, oh my God. But this one was really good. They weren't all good. Some of them sucked, I'll be honest with you. But this one was really good. And he went down there, and he was in the throes of Parkinson's, really shaking badly. He had a lot going on physically, and he was an easy cry. And before the game, he said, I'm going to go down there, and I'm going to read this poem into a microphone at Busch Stadium. And I said, Dad, don't. You're going to start crying, and the shaking, and he said, let other people worry about me shaking, and I will not cry. And I said, Dad, you're going to cry. And he said, I will not cry. And I said, okay, you're going to cry. And he said, I'll bet you $100 I don't cry. And I said, you're on. So he went down there. I was doing the game for Cardinal Television. I'm up in the booth. He's down there giving that speech. He gets through it, and the only one crying between the two of us was me. And he comes back up to the booth after he gave this speech, and he had a radio game to do. He walked right into my TV booth, put his hand out for his $100. And I just slapped his hand, and he went, I told you. And then went back over and did the game. It was obviously who were sitting in front of the Bushes, who rode that roller coaster every minute of every day. But, we all share in that a little bit. And this is a long-winded way of saying what Bob talked about, to be at Yankee Stadium and to watch him throw at that first pitch before Game 3. I've done 6 Super Bowls, 24 World Series, U.S. Opens, you name it. That is the most powerful sports moment and moment for this country I've ever witnessed. And it,
Yep. And
And I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to stop talking because I'm sure you'd rather hear from Bob. But all right, I'm going to stop talking.
the short postscript to that was, in a divided time such as we're going through now, in that moment, and for a long time after 9/11, George W. Bush was the president of all Americans. And in that moment, that was not just an exciting moment in its way, it was almost an affirmation that we're going to get through this. You know, he walked out there, gave it that. The audience didn't know that he was wearing a flak jacket underneath the windbreaker. It would have been enough just to get out there and toss a lollipop from the mound, not the front of the mound, from the rubber. He threw a plate-splitting strike. And, you know, sometimes symbolism matters. We needed a boost, and that was part of it.
Now, we have gotten ahead of ourselves a little bit, but would anybody like to see that clip? Yeah. All right, let's play the first pitch clip, please, Scott.
For tonight's ceremonial first pitch, and please welcome the President of the United States.
That response was not what you often hear today, a mixture of boos and cheers. That was nothing but cheers.
That's right. Now, one other moment that is among the all-time greats in terms of bringing people together came to be known as a miracle on ice. Let's take a look at that.
McClanahan is there. The puck is still loose. 11 seconds. You've got 10 seconds. The countdown going on right now. Morrow up to Schultz. 5 seconds left in the game. You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Well, folks, that was my favorite memory of my career, without question, and the favorite memory, I think, for a lot of sports fans around the country. It was unbelievable that night in Lake Placid, New York, on February the 22nd, 1980, and it was fun to be able to say something. In effect, I was rooting, as was 99.99% of the country, for the same team. There might have been 8 KGB agents somewhere in the fields of Nebraska who were upset with me. And somebody once asked me, what do I think the Soviet announcer said that night? And all I could think of, he might have said something like, do you believe in debacles? That, of course, came at a time when the country needed a boost. Believe it or not, the prime rate at that point was about 19%. The Soviets had invaded Afghanistan. We had threatened to boycott their Olympics in Moscow that summer, which we did. And then they paid us back in 1984 in Los Angeles. We had hostages being held in Iran, and we just felt not very good about ourselves. And that one night was more than a hockey game. It helped to galvanize the country, at least for a while. So let's just hope down the line we can get a few more sports miracles that can help galvanize this country, because we could sure use it. So anyway, have a great night. As I turn you back over right now to my buddies, Joe Buck and Bob Costas.
Yeah.
Well, you know, watching that and Al's call for like the 500th time, I got goosebumps again. I mean, it's just such a wonderful moment, and he hit upon it. That's the rare national broadcast where the announcer knows that everybody is rooting for the same team. And as Joe and I will attest, fans of both teams in almost any other game, hearing exactly the same words, infer that you hate their team and you're rooting for the other team. And little do they know that what you root for is the most dramatic game. If it's a 2-0 series, you want the team down 2-0 to win game 3. If in the 6th game, if you want anything, you want the team down 3-2 to push it to a 7th game. And you want the 7th game to go to the 9th inning or to extra innings. Or you root for, I hope this team wins because I want to go to that city where they have a better hotel and I have friends. There's no animus toward any team.
So wait a minute. So you're on the record that you don't actually hate the Yankees?
I don't hate the Yankees. Most people think I love the Yankees at the expense of their team.
Right.
But I don't hate any team.
Now, Joe, last night you were in Houston doing the Tampa Bay Bucks and the Houston Texans. You know, how do you approach it? You got about half the audience rooting for each.
Yeah, for some reason, it's different between football and baseball, in my opinion. I know I'm sitting in Dallas, Texas, where everybody is 100% certain that I rooted against the Rangers in the 2011 World Series. Go ahead, boo me if you like, that's fine. I wasn't serious. In fact, President Bush and Mrs. Bush were like, boo. I grew up as a, I'm a pleaser. I want everybody to love me. And
You're in the wrong line of work.
yeah, I am. Yeah. It is predominantly the main reason why I have not run for president at this point. So it's really the only reason. But the thing about baseball compared to football, not to get into the weeds on this, but every baseball game now, compared to when we were young, is on television. Mm-hmm. And the television announcers are rooting along with you. The Rangers have a great broadcast crew. You're a Rangers fan, you're watching them. It's Rangers guy hits a home run, we're happy. Astros guy hits a home run, we're mad. And then we show up when it matters the most, and the Rangers guy hits a home run, we're excited and happy because that's our job. And then the Cardinal guy hits a home run, and all of a sudden we're not sad. And we have to be excited and do it, and it hits people's ear the wrong way, and I completely get that. So it's just kind of a hazard of the job, and you have to be willing to kind of put up with it and know that a lot of people are going to falsely think or erroneously think that you don't like their team. It couldn't be further from the truth. Like Bob said, you just want good games, you do your job, and you go back to your family. That's kind of the way I look at it.
And another thing that should seem obvious, and we'll wrap up this topic, but it's lost on people. You have to raise your voice more to get over the crowd when the home team does something good. Because you don't raise your voice on a sacrifice fly by the road team in the 4th inning that makes the score 1-0, because you'd sound like an hysterical hyena if you did that. Then fans of that team, oh, he's not excited. Here's this party with my drunken buddies. We're all, going nuts. Well, that's you. We got a different job.
Now, Joe, you get to be a hysterical hyena as a St. Louis Blues season ticket holder.
Yeah.
And
there's me with my daughter Trudy and her friend Emma. It's like the one sport, and I know there are Dallas Stars fans in here. I'm going to admit to you right now, I don't like the Stars. Too bad. I don't care. I don't do hockey. I'm a Blues fan. Big deal. But it is kind of the one sport that I've been able. My dad was the first voice of the St. Louis Blues when they started. Bob helped me out in 1967. And he was there. He knew nothing about hockey. And they said, Jack, why don't you go call the Blues game? And he said he picked one guy every night. It was all on radio. It wasn't TV. And he said that guy was going to have the greatest game of his life that night because nobody could check anything that he was saying. So he just kind of made it up as he went. But he instilled in me a love for the Blues and what have you. But I think along the lines of what the theme is for the night is the unifying nature of sports. When you have a crowd, whether it's at a Stars game, Blues game, whatever, and our season tickets are right behind the net, and when a goal goes in and you have that moment of, exaltation, and you're excited, you are high-fiving everybody in your section. You don't know who they voted for. You don't know what they think about, personal rights. You have no idea their religion. None of that matters. All of a sudden, you're all in the same boat cheering for the same thing. That's the beauty of sports. That's the world that he and I get to live in. And as far as the you hate my team and all that, thank God people care. Thank God people
care.
even think that way, because if they were ambivalent to us showing up or whatever, it just wouldn't be the same. So I wouldn't want it the other way or any other way.
You know, it's another part of it, gambling. Now that it's so out in the open and it's proliferating, a lot of people don't care about which team wins. They care about whether the line is covered.
In 12 Olympics with NBC, you witnessed dozens and dozens of unifying and powerful moments. Let's take a look at one that might be at the top of your list.
But look who gets it next. The greatest. Oh, my. Once the most dynamic figure in sports, a gregarious man, now trapped inside that mask created by Parkinson's syndrome. So in one sense, a poignant figure, but look at him. Still a great, great presence. Still exuding nobility and stature. And the response he evokes is part affection, part excitement, but especially respect. What a moment. An Olympian, as young Cassius Clay, gold medal boxer, 1960, the Games of Rome. To become arguably the most famous person on this earth.
So, Sully, here's the story behind that. The other voice, of course, is the great Dick Enberg, his signature exclamation, "Oh my." We didn't know who the last torchbearer would be. Dick Ebersol, who was our boss for a long time at NBC, had the idea that it should be Muhammad Ali. And the Atlanta Olympic Organizing Committee was hesitant, and at least one of them said, he may be a hero to you, but down here, he's still a draft dodger. And Ebersol and Don Mischer, who was the producer of the event, persuaded them that no, people's minds have been changed, it'll be a moment of reconciliation. But they wanted it to be a surprise to everyone in the stadium, so it wasn't announced beforehand. A dozen people, max, knew about it. And Ebersol said to me and Dick Enberg, not going to tell you who it is, you'll recognize him or her right away, want your reaction to be as spontaneous as the people watching on television and in the stadium. And I actually ran the possibilities through my mind, and Ali popped into my head, and I said, no, he can't do it. It's impossible, he can't do it. And they rehearsed it one time in the cloak of secrecy at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't know this until a couple of years ago when the great Olympic swimmer Janet Evans, who was the second to last torchbearer, she climbed up the steps and handed the torch to Muhammad. She told me that in the rehearsal, he dropped the torch because he was trembling so much. But then, like the champion he was, he came through in that moment. And whatever Dick said and whatever I said is just what occurred to us at the time.
One quick thing about Muhammad Ali. My dad, who had interviewed him prior to and during the Cassius Clay days, it's a great interview that's online, but my dad, who had Parkinson's, as I mentioned, and was in the throes of it at the end of his life, was also a great after-dinner speaker. And he said one night, I met Muhammad Ali the other night. We shook hands. It took people half an hour to get us untangled. When in doubt, laugh at it. So, yeah.
And when, as it just occurs to me, when Muhammad received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, it was President Bush who draped it around his neck. And that was a wonderful moment of reconciliation. He was a dynamic figure, but he was a polarizing figure. But I think in the end, it wasn't the polarizing views, it was his overriding humanity. And then it was poignant the way this once most nimble and beautiful of athletes was reduced to that state, once the most talkative and entertaining, virtually reduced to a whisper at that point, and yet somehow the guy who proclaimed, I'm too pretty to be a boxer, was willing to step out in front of the largest global audience and be presented that way. That was deeply moving, and without having to say it, you knew that everybody in that stadium had almost exactly the same thought at exactly the same time. That rarely happens.
Incredibly powerful. And Joe, you told the story beautifully about your dad in September 17th, 2001, when baseball reopened, brought the world back to sports. And that is a oft-forgotten chapter in that post 9/11 healing story, the role that sports played. So even though you've told the story, let's take a look at the video, not the poem, but kind of the lead up to the poem that your dad read that night.
I don't know about you, but as for me, the question has already been answered. Should we be here? Yes. Should we show others how to demonstrate our resolve? Yes, and we shall do it here this evening. The Cardinals and the Milwaukee Brewers and all of baseball welcome you back to Busch Stadium and this special evening in memory of those who lost their lives in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. And in honor of the heroic rescue workers and the pride that we have in our country, which we shall show you here this evening.
So we've seen now time and again the power of sports as a healing force. Why do you think that is? We'll start with you, Joe.
I mean, if you think about it, and I kind of touched on it, but there we all were filing through those gates or through the media entrance, whatever it was, players there. It just had a completely different feel. I mean, when have you seen players with their arms around each other in the dugout while, this announcer from the other team, in the case of the Brewers, is welcoming people back to baseball? It was a signal to all of us that life would go on, and sports is such a big part of American life that this is what we do, and we shouldn't apologize for it, and we shouldn't, bow down or, worry about the message it's sending. We need to go back to life as we know it. We need to mourn those lives that were lost, but we need to go back to what we do. And in the case of St. Louis and the Cardinals, what we do is go down to Busch Stadium and watch baseball.
And as President Bush knows, it was actually fortunate and in a way poetic that the Yankees got all the way to the World Series. Much of America, it's like Notre Dame, Duke, the Cowboys, they either love them or a portion of America doesn't like them at all. And that certainly applies to the Yankees, but not that October.
Right.
Joe Torre and the whole team were so likable that they took some of the edge off of it to begin with. But when you saw people showing up, ball players, not in the World Series as I remember, but in many of the regular season games back in September, wore NYPD and FDNY caps. Mike Piazza hit a dramatic home run for the Mets the first game back. They were playing the Braves, and the players all were hugging each other from opposing teams, that sort of thing. And then when Ronan Tynan sang God Bless America, the seventh inning stretch at those games at Yankee Stadium, and as you know, Joe, even though it turned out that the Diamondbacks won the World Series, 2 of those 3 games were like if you wrote a script, no one would believe it, with the Tino Martinez homer and the Scott Brocious homer, and then Derek Jeter, Mr. November, with the home run that wins the game just as the clock strikes midnight, and it's November 1st or whatever it was. I mean, there was something that was so theatrical and dramatic and a shared experience, and people needed that.
Now tonight, after our conversation, you'll get a chance to go through the Game Changer United by Sports exhibit, and one of the centerpieces is about Jesse Owens. There's medals there that have never been on display before, all kinds of powerful memorabilia and artifacts to take a look at. And Bob, you know a lot about the Jesse Owens story through your relationship with the late Marty Glickman, who of course was on the U.S. track and field team. This image is Marty Glickman and Sam Stoller, probably a publicity shot. They were actually training on the boat, on the ship on the way over to go to the games in Berlin. So what are your reflections on the Jesse Owens?
Marty Glickman, by the way, was a multi-sport athlete, football, basketball, and track at Syracuse University. He was the first true athlete turned broadcaster, not as an analyst or color man, but as a play-by-play man. And he practically invented the way basketball was called on the radio. And he was a wonderful broadcaster, and then he was a mentor to a lot of us, especially those around New York. So he was on the team, and The head of the USOC, later the head of the IOC, was a virulent anti-Semite named Avery Brundage. And one of the track coaches, Dean Cromwell, was scarcely better. And after Jesse Owens, who would wind up winning 4 gold medals, after he had won 3 and embarrassed Hitler looking on from his box, Sam and Marty were supposed to run in the 4x100 relay. And Dean Cromwell said, "You guys will not run." And Jesse Owens at the meeting said, "We'd win no matter what. You know, maybe me and Ralph Metcalf are a little faster than those 2 guys, but we win anyway." And they trained and they're part of the team, let them run. And Cromwell said, "You will be quiet and do as you're told." And Marty told that story with tremendous emotion always. So they trained, but because they were Jewish and because somebody or a couple of somebodies, maybe more than a few, in the United States were more concerned about Hitler's feelings than about those Jewish Americans. But at that same Olympics, Marty met a Japanese competitor, and during World War II, he got word that the Japanese athlete had died. And I was very close to Marty, and he told me this story once over dinner. He goes, "When I heard that he had died, someone from a country that was trying to annihilate ours, I was bonded with him through the fact that we were both Olympians, and I wept when I heard that he had died." Jesse Owens at that same Olympics was having trouble qualifying in the long jump, which he ultimately won, but he came this close to not qualifying. He was having trouble getting his footing. And Lutz Long, a German long jumper, do you have video of that? There they are.
Oh, yeah.
He came up to Jesse and said, "This is how you do it. You know, this will help you." And so Jesse qualified and then beat Lutz in the final. But their bond was as athletes, not as Germans or Americans, not as a white man or black man. They were athletes, and they transcended the awful hatred of their time. Now, that hatred was all around them in the Olympic Stadium. And Marty returned to that stadium sometime in the 1970s or early 80s, and just walked around. And HBO did like a short documentary about it. Walked around, and he was recollecting what had happened and taking stock of his career and his life, and that was one of the centerpieces of it. And the closing thing was, I looked up, and he was alone. I looked up at the box where Hitler was. "I'm still here. He's not."
Wow. And Joe, you have a connection to this story too through your dad.
Well, yeah, my dad, it pales in comparison, but my dad met everybody along the way and did an interview with Jesse Owens, and I was 7, and my dad gave Jesse a poster to sign for me, which is not in the sports area of my house, but in our living room, which it says, to Joe Buck and best of luck, and signed by Jesse Owens in 1976. So I was 7, and that is not just something that I look at every day, but something that my 7-year-old boys look at every day. I've told them the story, and I'll keep telling them the story until they remember it and carry it with them the rest of their lives.
Incredible. So let's shift gears from Nazis and
something a little more upbeat than Nazis.
Upbeat. Yeah. And I can't think of anything more upbeat than Little League baseball. And President and Mrs. Bush.
Some rhythmic clapping from the crowd. At least from the fans of the Satchel Paige Little League. The tension mounts. Bases loaded. Quentin Thomas on deck. Jalen Stewart hops one toward first. Claire comes in. It's off the edge of her glove. A run scores. Everybody moves up a base. Good try, Claire. And the bases remain loaded. And here comes Quentin Thomas. Quentin is a very practical young man. When asked why he likes baseball, he said, "Because it allows me to meet the president." First left-handed hitter we've seen. Here's a pop to the opposite field. It's in there for a base hit. 1 run scores. Running right by the stop sign, right by the chicken, 2-run score.
So, Bob, if now, you did this like it was Game 7 of a World Series.
Not exactly. Not exactly.
But is this from your C-SPAN years?
I guess C-SPAN did air it live.
They did, and it's still out there. But what was that like? This was the very first of the 20 T-ball and the South Lawn games in May of 2001.
Yeah, it was so much fun. And, you know, President Bush, as his dad was, the members of the Bush family, a legitimate baseball fan, not just, hey, I'll show up at the World Series or the All-Star game. He told me when I came into the White House, we were making small talk, mostly about baseball. He said, after I read the briefings about the most important domestic and international issues, the next thing I read every morning is the box scores. And he wasn't kidding. I mean, he's like extremely knowledgeable, former owner of the Texas Rangers, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I thought one of his best moments was in a debate with Al Gore during the 2000 election. And the moderator asked what I thought was a very good question. What do you think is your greatest mistake, your greatest regret? And he said, trading Sammy Sosa for Harold Baines.
So fast forward to 2004, and Joe Buck gets the nod then in his Fox Sports days, and that's what Joe looked like.
He's a lot more casual than I was. I had a suit and tie on.
Yeah, you got this suit and tie on.
Thought you were overdressed. I think that was appropriate. I don't know. Do we know who I'm working with?
That's actually Chris Purcell, who was a White House communications
There you go.
staffer.
Well, he was helping me. Chris Purcell worked a lot harder than I did that day, trying to figure out who all these kids were. It was so great. Brought my family. My daughters were little. It was just amazing. And obviously, they started with Costas, and the president went all through the alphabet and came back around to B, and then asked me in 2004. It was one of the great honors of my life, and to be sitting in that seat before the game started, and President Bush was walking by, and I was like, is he even going to see me? Does he even know who I am? And he walked by and went, Joe boy! And I was like, wow, that was cool. And so then I proceeded, and I told the story. We had the pleasure of having lunch today. Bob, his wife Jill, and we had lunch up in one of the rooms of this beautiful facility, and I told the story that we were walking back after that game, and at that time, ironically enough, the Cardinals, the team that I kind of represented, were playing the Rangers, and we were walking back up this long walk to the White House, and the president said to me, hey, have you seen the Cardinals-Rangers score today? And I said, no, I haven't. He said, you know, the darndest thing, of all the TV networks I can get in the White House, I can't get the Rangers games on Saturdays or whatever that was. I was like, you can watch a guy scratch his cheek in Kandahar, but you cannot get the Rangers? What? So clearly, somebody dropped the ball during the Bush administration. But on Saturdays, when they weren't on cable, it was on local TV here, he couldn't get it. So we bonded over that.
Well, and there is a full South Lawn T-ball display in the Game Changer exhibit, and there is in the permanent exhibit too. And we're real pleased to have Pat Wilson, who's the CEO of Little League International, here with us tonight in support of that too. So Little League is as powerful as the pro sports too, in terms of the volunteer effort at the local level and just bringing communities together. Now, the next thing, there's also Title IX is covered, of course, in the impact of that. Anybody who has daughters or any women who got to play sports because of Title IX knows the power of that. But in 2008, there was an incredible story that got some attention at the time, but has largely, I think, been forgotten. And what happened, it was a game late in the season between Division II, Central Washington and Western Oregon, a softball game. And we've got, there we go. So that's Western Oregon. That is Sarah Tukolsky in red there. And what happened, early in the game, she hit a home run. It was the first home run she had ever hit in her life. And it was a big game playing for the conference championship. And as she went to round first, she missed the bag, doubled back to touch first, and in this awkward pivot, tore her ACL. So now they gather the umpires. She's in excruciating pain. She's hugging first base. The other two, there were two runners on base who have scored. And the umpire tells the coach, she either gets up and makes it, or it's a single. The two runners score, but it's a single. And she can't get assistance from her teammates. And the two women that you see here from Central Washington, Mallory Holtman and Liz Wallace, said to the umpire, can we carry her around the bases? And he thought for a minute. Nobody really knew what the rule was. He thought for a minute and said, yes, you can. And this was the result that ended up winning the SB for Sportsmanship Moment of the Year. But showing this image was actually Joe's idea when we had a prep call last week, and you remembered it and remembered the power of. But what is this when you?
I mean, I just think it says everything you need to know. This is it. You know, whether you want to, you can take a lot of different tacks on this. You can look at it from a lot of different angles. But when two teams are competing for a title, and somebody hits a home run and can't make it around the bases, the opposition is there to pick that person up and carry them around the bases. It's literal, it's figurative. I just think it says everything you need to know about not just women's sports. And I'm a girl dad. I'm the proud dad of two girls, 29 and 26, that are living in New York. But just in sports in general. And the idea that it's different than the fan bases. There is so much respect between two teams. And in this case, I mean, that it was offered by the opposition, agreed to, and then they carried her around to make it, instead of, in essence, a 2-run single, a 3-run home run, to give her first home run, competing for a title. This is exactly what sports is all about.
And Western Oregon, by the way, won 4-2, so it wasn't a deciding run, but still an unbelievable moment. Now, Bob, among your many Olympics at NBC, and I had the privilege of being there for 3 of them, including 2002 in Salt Lake. Again,
yes.
Country healing post 9/11. Incredible moment when the World Trade Center
yes.
flag was brought into the opening ceremony. Another decision was made. Normally the president would sit in a box. Well,
yes.
Our president sat with the athletes.
So cool. So cool.
And of course, a funny moment happened here. That's Sasha Cohen, to his right, who was a figure skater who would go on to win gold in Torino a few years later, dialed her mom on the phone and handed the phone to President Bush. And as you may recall, Mr. President, you told her mother how polite her daughter was and what a good job she had done raising her. And this became a moment. But what do you? There's so many unifying moments that emerge from these things. What do you remember about those post 9/11 games?
When they brought in the flag, the tattered flag from the World Trade Center, that was very moving. And sometimes, as Joe knows, the picture in the moment speaks for itself. There's just nothing to say. Usually we're there. Radio's different from television. In television, you say less, but you try to put the appropriate caption beneath the picture. Some pictures need no caption, or any caption you could think of is insufficient for the image. So as I recall, I didn't say anything.
Right.
For quite a while. We said what it was, identified what it was. Katie Couric was with me. But apart from that, we were silent for a very long time.
Now, another element of the exhibit is how diplomacy comes into play. There's the ping pong paddles in there from ping pong diplomacy with China. And President Bush still is the only U.S. president to attend a away Olympics overseas when he went with Mrs. Bush to Beijing in 2008, and he did it for diplomatic reasons, relationship building with Hu Jintao. And while he was there, he of course spoke out about human rights abuses, and we attended a church service, which was a powerful thing to do. And as soon as you mentioned it in a press conference, a joint press conference with Hu Jintao, the media was rushed out of the room until it was so embarrassing. Hu Jintao allowed the handlers to bring him back into the room. So it was incredibly powerful from a diplomatic and also advocacy standpoint. While since President Bush happened to be in the neighborhood, he swung by the International
That's right,
Broadcast
he did.
Center. And you sat down for an interview. President Bush was really excited about being asked about human rights and Russia invading Georgia while we were there.
Yeah, because Russia invading Georgia happened during the opening ceremony.
That's right.
Yeah, and President Bush was called away. It was a tap on the shoulder, called away and advised what was going on. As I remember, what really helped me there was that President Bush and I were acquainted.
Right.
I had been at the White House 3 times, the T-ball game, an HBO interview, which was about his sports fandom, not about any policy stuff, and then, typical of President Bush, just because he wanted a baseball moment, he invited every living Hall of Famer to a luncheon at the ballpark, at the White House. The ballpark was the T-ball stadium out to the side, and he asked me and Billy Crystal and a few other people to be there, and I'd intersected with him a few times when he owned the Rangers. So I think if it had been cold under those circumstances, hello, Mr. President, I wouldn't have been as comfortable. But the president also understood that given what was going on, I did that interview as if it was Meet the Press. And he understood and respected it. And then he signed autographs for everybody there, all the interns and everybody. I still have a picture of the 2 of us, and he signed it to Bob Costas, a good man who knows baseball. So even though we were at the Olympics, it was baseball.
So before we close, just a couple of housekeeping things. Bob and Joe and Pat Wilson from Little League each recorded episodes of our podcast, which is called The Strategist, which tells you something about the Bush Center. So look for those in the coming days and weeks to be posted. Each one of them was excellent. So subscribe to follow The Strategist. We've got a couple more Engage events coming up this fall. You see here October 22nd. We're going from sports uniting people to America's economic realignment around the world.
That'll be just as entertaining as tonight for all you people.
Yeah, we hope so.
It'll be a million laughs.
Yeah. Colin Clark that night will have a much more difficult job than I have tonight. And then, of course, we get into the holiday spirit with Deck the Halls on November 18th with a great panel of some of Mrs. Bush's former staffers from the East Wing talking about holiday traditions at the White House. And, of course, on your way out tonight, you are going to be able to visit the Game Changer. Thanks again to Gary Weber. And you've really got it. You're going to feel like you're stepping into these incredible moments. So please stop in and visit and tell a friend afterwards. It's really extraordinary. Major kudos to Teresa Lendling, the director of the Bush Center Museum, and Laura Minton, who worked on her staff on this exhibit. They did an extraordinary job. So now we'll go to the lightning round.
All right.
Okay. So, Joe, what do you...
Have you not figured out that he and I talk a lot? Like, there is no lightning. It's very slow-moving lightning.
So, Joe, what are you reading, listening to, watching? Give us a recommendation.
Oh, I cannot tell you. It would be embarrassing to tell you what I'm watching. But it's Netflix junk. Nothing that is really educating me. I have gotten into, and I'm sure, Bob, you know him. I've only met him in passing. Mitch Albom.
Oh, yeah. The Tuesdays with Maury.
Tuesdays with Maury, and he's written a series of books that are about the same length. I'm not that smart. Let's be honest about it. And my attention is very, very short. So these are smallish books, but they are powerful. And he had one that he just finished and just came out. It's called The Little Liar. And has anybody in here read it?
Well, look at that.
Did you like it? I couldn't put it down.
Derek Blake read it.
It's following this. How's this for lightning for you? It follows 4 different people through the Holocaust. 3 who were involved as prisoners, and 1 who was a lieutenant for Nazi Germany, and it is fantastic. So you know, those are good departures for me when I'm getting ready for a game where part of your brain is like, oh my God, this is the biggest thing ever. It's going to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Houston Texans. The whole world is waiting to hear what you have to say about the Buccaneers and Texans, when the truth is nobody cares what I have to say about the Buccaneers and Texans. But to go to bed and read something that reminds you that the world's a lot bigger than the Buccaneers and the Texans, like The Little Liar, is something I would recommend it for anybody.
Bob, upcoming.
To make it the lightning round, the Billy Joel and Jerry Jones, Billy Joel is on HBO Max, and Jerry Jones documentary on Netflix.
Right.
Both worth your time.
Absolutely. Bob, up-and-coming broadcast talent bursting on the scene that we should pay attention to.
Well, the one that really impresses me, and I actually put it this way, I don't mean to embarrass Joe, but someone asked me this question a week or two ago, and I said he's the most impressive young broadcaster to come along since Joe Buck, who was in his mid-20s when he landed at Fox and wound up doing the World Series. Noah Eagle, who is the son of Ian Eagle of CBS, is only 26, 27 years old, and he sounds as good as some Hall of Fame broadcaster at age 45 or 50. He's terrific on football, does Notre Dame at Big Ten, and he's going to be one of the announcers on the NBA on NBC when it comes back to NBC next season. Tremendous.
Joe, favorite athlete interview?
Michael Phelps. I did an interview with Michael for a show I did on DirecTV called Undeniable, and I had known Michael a little bit, so I was comfortable talking to him, and I went into his dressing room beforehand. He said, be ready, because I'm going to bear it all tonight. And he talked about, you know, going through rehab and what it was like when he walked into the facility, and they took everything from him, and he just he didn't want to be around anybody else because he knew that they all knew that he was Michael Phelps, and going into the cafeteria where there was this big American flag and sitting himself on a folding chair and just looked up at this American flag, and his life was, in his mind, in ruins, just crying. And then him being honest and saying it was a picture of him on the cover of Sports Illustrated with 20+ gold medals around his neck. And I said, what do you see when you look at this picture? And he said, you know, I see a person who was told that he was born to save his parents' marriage, and that didn't work. And I see a guy with a goofy smile, weird teeth, and big ears. And I said, while the rest of the world sees 20+ gold medals. And it was as raw and as open as anybody. You realize that I don't care who they are, the greatest of the greats, they're all human, and they've all had trials in their lives, and they've all been to the bottom, and they've all worked their way up or outworked the people around them to be the great athletes that they became.
Bob, favorite non-athlete interview?
Wow. You know, I did that late night show that followed David Letterman for many years on NBC, and the range was incredible. Paul McCartney, people say that was as good an interview as he has ever given. He was so open. And the very fact that it was McCartney, at that point, I'm, you know, in my late 30s, and I'm thinking of being 11 years old and watching McCartney and the Beatles on Ed Sullivan on a black and white TV in my parents' living room. And I'll admit to you, I thought to myself, any of these people back at Comac High School in Long Island watching this going, hey, look at Bobby Costas, he's talking to Paul.
That's,
you know, so that was good.
Joe, a sporting event you love to work but haven't?
I really don't have a list like that, and that's not to duck the question. I've done college basketball. I've done live bass fishing on TV, which
He's one of the great play-by-play men of bass fishing.
Bass fishing. Hands down, live bass fishing.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, between 5:30 and 7 Eastern time on that very day, somebody forgot to tell the fish to bite hooks. It was the worst thing I've ever been a part of. I've done Robbie Knievel jumping over limousines in Vegas on live TV. I've done college basketball, baseball, football, golf.
Okay.
There's really nothing I want to do.
Bob, how about a favorite sports blooper story?
Should I?
Yes.
Well, this involves, as so much tonight has, his dad. But it's not his dad's blooper. His dad is one of the greatest broadcasters of all time. And sometime in the 1970s, The Cardinals are playing the Cubs at Busch Stadium, and for whatever reason, it's National Dairy Day at the ballpark. This, of course, is one of your great promotional days. Fans flock from neighboring states for the colorful festivities. And, you know, they have their egg roll or their cow milking thing on the field, whatever it is that you do on National Dairy Day, and then the game begins. And as Joe knows, the booth in St. Louis, especially back then, was like a two-tiered affair. So there was the area where the broadcasters sat, and then a few seats up from there, visitors could take in the broadcast. And the president of the National Dairy Council shows up in the booth. And Joe's dad liked to schmooze with visitors, especially if the game was moving kind of slowly. So he brings him down, has a few pleasantries with him, and says, "Oh, great, enjoy your time in St. Louis, drop my name in any restaurant, you'll get a good table." The guy has brought with him a woman who is billed as Miss Cheesecake. Now, understand this as I can tell most of you do, so I have no fear here. It's the 1970s. Mores were different. Miss Cheesecake shows up in the booth wearing a white one-piece bathing suit, white high heels, as if she's in a beauty pageant, with a sash going across her, but instead of saying like Miss Wisconsin or something, it actually says Miss Cheesecake. All right, so Buck is now calling the fourth inning when Miss Cheesecake comes sashaying down the steps from the back of the booth and presents to each of the broadcasters, Jack, Mike Shannon, former Cardinal players in the middle, and Bob Starr, who's on the end, the third broadcaster in the booth, 3 tiny individual cheesecakes as a goodwill offering from the National Dairy Council. Then she proceeds to the back of the booth as Ken Reitz grounds to shortstop, 1 out in the Cardinal fourth. And as Ted Simmons walks from the on-deck circle to home plate, Mr. Buck leans across Shannon, eyes Starr, and says, "So, Bob, what do you think of Miss Cheesecake?" And Starr, who was apparently distracted for whatever reason, thinks he said, "What do you think of this cheesecake?" And he says, "I'll tell you, Jack, I'd like to try a piece of that right now."
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, Bob Costas and Joe Buck.
Turned out to be a good suggestion.
Yeah.